Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, slightly grimy stroll back in time to an era that smells like smoke, sweat, and questionable soup. Imagine this: you wake up in a wooden room that creaks every time you move, sunlight filtering through a small slit of a window. But instead of crisp morning air, what greets you is the unmistakable scent of damp straw, unwashed bodies, and, well, let's just say hygiene hasn't been invented yet. Welcome to the Middle Ages, your new home for the next 24 hours. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before dawn, not because you wanted to, but because the rooster outside your window seems possessed. You stretch, or at least try to, on a straw mattress that's basically a bag full of spiky hay, home to a thriving colony of fleas. You scratch at your arm, already itching, and wonder when you last had a shower. The answer: never. The very concept of bathing regularly hasn't caught on yet. Most people here believe water carries disease into the body through the pores. Ironically, they're half right, but for all the wrong reasons. The room is dim, lit by a single tallow candle that smells like a mixture of sheep, fat, and regret. Beside you, someone's snoring. It could be your bedmate, because in this era, sharing beds isn't optional. Space is scarce, and warmth is communal. You shift carefully so you don't wake whoever it is, though honestly, they might be used to the sound of straw crunching beneath restless strangers. A rat scurries past the corner. You stare at it, both horrified and weirdly unsympathized. Rats are basically part of medieval decor. People even name them. There's Roger the Rat, possibly your only consistent roommate. You'd chase him, but you're barefoot, and the cold stone floor feels like punishment. Outside, the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer starts up. Life here begins early, because daylight is currency. You sit up, wrapping a coarse blanket around your shoulders. It scratches your skin like sandpaper. But it's that, or freeze. The wind seeps through the cracks in the wall, whistling like some ancient ghost. You start to wonder if that S, where all the ghost stories came from, just cold drafts and bad insulation. You reach for your shoes. They're not really shoes, more like leather bags, tied together with hope. One sole is missing, but that's fine. Everyone's feet are tough here. You slide them on, wincing at the stiffness. Then you take a deep breath, or at least attempt to. The air is thick, heavy with smoke from the communal hearth downstairs. Someone's already burning wood, and probably half the roof with it. You shuffle toward the door. It creaks loudly, because oil is a luxury, and hinges squeal for attention like hungry cats. You step into the main room. One table, one bench, one fire pit. That's home. The fire pit is the heart of the house, the source of light, warmth, and constant risk of suffocation. Chimneys, not yet. The smoke just curls lazily around your head, staining the ceiling black and your lungs gray. Someone mumbles a prayer near the fire. Religion is oxygen. Here every breath, every action, every fear is steeped in it. You're expected to thank God for waking up alive, which, considering the mortality rate, is fair. Even the healthiest peasants can expect to live around 35 years. If the rats, disease, or hunger don't get them first. As you reach for your cloak, your fingers brush the wall. It's damp, always damp. Medieval houses breathe mold. The thatch roof above is leaking in slow motion, and every drop feels like time ticking toward the inevitable cold. You can already sense that this isn't a day for comfort. You catch your reflection in a bit of polished metal, a mirror, sort of. Your face looks tired, your hair matted. Everyone's does. Bathing happens maybe once or twice a year, usually on holy festivals. The rest of the time, you cover the smell with herbs, or just pretend no one else stinks. A child coughs nearby. It's a deep, rattling sound, the kind that doesn't stop. You glance over, no one panics, sits just normal. In a world without antibiotics, sickness is part of the soundtrack. Bad air, they say, miasma. You think of pollution back home and realize some things never really change. You pull the door open and step outside. The cold bites instantly. Mist hangs low over the dirt path. The village still sleeps, but smoke rises from a few huts. You can hear the distant bleating of goats, the slosh of someone emptying a bucket of waste right into the street. You'd flinch, but this is routine. It's hard not to stare at the ground. The street doubles as a sewer. People toss everything out the window, food, scraps, chamber pots, you name it. The mud isn't really mud, it's history, let's call it. You quickly learn to walk in the center, avoiding puddles of unknown origin. And yet, despite the filth, life hums with quiet persistence. You see an old woman feeding chickens, a boy chasing a goose, a dog gnawing on something suspiciously bone-shaped. Somewhere, a rooster screams again, just in case you forgot he exists. You take a slow breath through your mouth, obviously, and realize you've made it this far. But historians still argue whether medieval people even noticed the smell after a while, or if they just evolved stronger noses. Either way, your modern senses are already protesting. A joke crosses your mind. Deodorant would have been considered witchcraft here, and maybe it was. Still, there's something oddly peaceful about the scene. The fog, the soft clatter of wooden wheels in the distance, the rhythm of a world that has no rush. It's filthy, yes, but it's also run-diluted existence. No phones, no screens, just survival. You can almost hear your own heartbeat sinking with the dawn. And as you stand there, clutching your cloak tighter, you realize something unsettling. It's only morning. You've been awake for an hour, and you already miss the 21st century. The morning stench hits harder once you step fully into the street. It's not a single smell, it's an orchestra of rot, smoke, manure, sweat, and whatever your neighbor tossed out the window an hour ago. You cover your nose with your sleeve, but the wool only adds another layer of sour dampness to the mix. You're already nostalgic for deodorant and plumbing. The sky above is pale gray, streaked with thin lines of chimney smoke. A rooster struts proudly beside a puddle that might once have been water. Chickens dart across the path, clucking like gossiping villagers. And speaking of villagers, here they come, yawning, stretching, scratching, men in tunics that haven't seen soap in months. Women with scarves over their hair, carrying buckets that slosh ominously. Everyone moves with purpose, even if that purpose is simply not freezing. Someone tosses out a bucket from a window above. It splashes dangerously close to your feet. You jump back, heart racing, and the woman leaning out the window just shrugs. Gardes, low. She yells a French warning that literally means, watch out for the water, but in reality, it's sewage. The phrase will survive centuries, eventually becoming Lou. Congratulations, you just witnessed linguistic history, and probably stepped in part of it. Your stomach churns, and not from hunger. The smell is constant, clinging to everything. The wooden beams, the animal hides, even the people. Historians still argue whether medieval towns were truly unbearable, or if modern noses are just spoiled by indoor plumbing. Either way, you'd trade a year of Netflix for a stick of air freshener. You pass a baker's shop, or rather, a small hut with smoke pouring from a crooked chimney. The smell of bread does its best to fight through the odor of the street. For a moment, you feel comforted, warmth, familiarity, and then a donkey wanders by and ruins the illusion with a gift you step in before you can dodge. Welcome to the medieval morning commute. You notice people huddling near the well. Water is precious, but dangerous. No one fully understands germs yet, but everyone knows someone who drank from the wrong bucket and didn't wake up the next day. So, the safer option, ale, yes, even for breakfast. Brewing beer kills most bacteria though. It also ensures everyone spends the day mildly buzzed. You watch as a man fills a jug, the cloudy liquid swirling inside like something from a swamp. He nods politely. His teeth are the color of oak bark. You nod back, trying not to stare. Dental hygiene here is, let's call it experimental. Toothbrushes exist, but mostly for the rich, and toothpaste, crushed bones and herbs. That's if you're fancy. Otherwise, you just chew on twigs. A horse-drawn cart clatters by, wooden wheels crunching over stones. The driver shouts, his voice raspy from years of smoke inhalation. You glance into the cart and wish you hadn't 2 pigs, a pile of turnips, and something under a tarp that might be meat, or not. You're not brave enough to ask. You keep walking. The town wakes with noise, hammering, shouting, the clang of iron from the blacksmith's forge. Sparks fly into the air, dancing against the fog. Children run barefoot, chasing a wooden hoop down the street. One boy grins at you, missing several teeth, and shouts something you don't understand. He's speaking Middle English, which sounds like a cat gargling marbles. You smile back anyway. Your modern brain starts looking for a coffee shop. You laugh at yourself quietly. The closest thing you'll get to caffeine here is weak ale or bitter herbal tea that tastes like boiled weeds. Still, the locals seem content. For them, this is life, routine. For you, it's a sensory assault. You pause near a pig pen. The animals grunt lazily, rooting through scraps. One of them looks up at you with curious eyes. There's intelligence there, or maybe just judgment. You realize this pig probably lives better than most peasants. At least it gets fed regularly. A church bell tolls in the distance, deep and heavy. It echoes across the town, bouncing off stone and thatch. Everyone pauses. Instinct. The sound marks time. Here's the only clock that matters. Morning mass will begin soon, and attendance isn't optional. You'll have to go too, but for now, you linger in the square, watching the scene unfold. A man stirs a pot outside a tavern. The smell wafts toward you, onions, maybe cabbage, definitely something questionable. Breakfast stew. It looks awful, but your stomach growls anyway. You haven't eaten yet, and the cold is working its way into your bones. You approach cautiously, trying not to look too eager. Got a penny? The man grunts. His beard is more soup than hair. You check your pockets, nothing but lint and a pebble. He squints at you, unimpressed, then move along you do, because medieval hospitality costs money, and you have none. Beggars are everywhere, sitting by walls with their hands out, eyes sunken. Some are lepers diseased, wrapped in rags, ringing little bells to warn people away. You step aside as one passes, their cough echoing through the narrow street. Historians still argue whether medieval towns were more compassionate or more cruel. Charity is preached from the pulpit, but fear rules the streets. You can sense it in the way people avoid eye contact, clutch their cloaks tighter. A butcher slams a cleaver onto his table nearby. You flinch, meat splatters, bones crack. He grins with missing teeth and shouts, "Fresh." You can't help thinking his definition of fresh might be different from yours. A dog darts forward to lick the blood off the dirt. The butcher doesn't stop him. Waste nothing. That's the rule here. A breeze picks up, carrying with it every smell imaginable. You almost laugh at how absurd it is, like someone blended a barn, a bonfire, and an open sewer. But in a strange way, you start to acclimate. Your brain dulls the edges, lets you breathe through it. You glance up at the rooftops, thatched with straw, uneven and patched. A cat prowls along, one tail flicking, hunting birds. The morning sun finally pushes through the mist, turning everything gold for a moment. It's almost beautiful until you see the smoke again, curling upward like a warning. Somewhere, someone is already shouting about taxes. Another man yells back about tithes. Arguments about money are eternal, apparently. You start walking again, past the baker, past the tavern, past a woman scrubbing laundry in icy water. Her hands are red and raw, yet she hums softly. You realize that despite the filth, despite the smell, people here still find rhythm, still laugh, still live. And then, right as you start to feel a sliver of peace, someone opens a chamber pot above your head. You jump aside just in time, heart racing. The splash lands inches away. A few drops hit your cloak. You look up in horror, and a voice from above calls cheerfully, "Sorry, love." You wipe your sleeve, sigh, and whisper to yourself, "You're not gonna make it 24 hours, are you?" Your stomach growls again, louder this time, echoing off the stone walls like an impatient ghost. You realize you haven't eaten since, well, ever, technically, since you just woke up here. You follow your nose, or at least try to, because the smells in this town are all competing for dominance, like medieval gladiators. Somewhere between burnt bread and barnyard accident, you catch the faint scent of something edible. A line has formed outside the baker's hut. People clutch tiny coins, faces tense. Bread is life, here literally, but wheat is expensive, and most peasants settle for rye or barley loaves that look more like bricks than food. You shuffle closer, watching the baker's apprentice pull something from the oven. It's dark, dense, and smoking slightly. The crowd murmurs approval. You think that's it, but you're too hungry to judge. You finally get your turn. The baker eyes you suspiciously, wiping sweat from his brow with an arm streaked in flour. You paying or staring. He grumbles, "You have nothing." So you mumble something about being new in town. He laughs a harsh, barking sound. "Then you'll eat what dogs don't want, stranger." He tosses you a crust, blackened at the edges. You catch it before it hits the ground, because pride is useless when you're starving. You bite in, it's solid, chewy, like gnawing on a wooden shoe, but it's food and it's warm. You close your eyes, pretending it's something from home toast. Maybe. Then your teeth crunch on something hard, pebble, grain, husk, or possibly rat tail. You decide not to investigate. Beside you, a woman dips her bread in a mug of liquid. You look closer, it's beer, for breakfast. She catches your eye and raises her mug. "Health," she says cheerfully. You force a smile and nod, though the smell alone could strip paint. You've read about this. People drank ale instead of water, because boiling the liquid IV brewing killed most bacteria. Historians still argue whether this meant everyone was tipsy all day or just immune to hangovers. Either way, even kids get small beer, weak, cloudy, but safer than the well. You get curious and ask for a sip. The woman shrugs and hands over her mug. The taste hits you like a musty brick, sour, bitter, thick. You hand it back quickly, smiling through your grimace. She laughs, showing 2 gold teeth. "First time," but you nod. "Don't worry," she says. "You'll learn to like it, or die. Either works." You're starting to appreciate medieval humor. A man nearby unwraps a piece of salted fish, tearing at it with his teeth. You watch him gnaw, fascinated and horrified. Salted fish is a luxury here, but it's also a choking hazard if you don't soak it first. He doesn't. You politely look away before it becomes a medical emergency. Another vendor waves you over. He's got pies, sort of. The crusts are thick and gray, like someone baked mud. You ask what's inside, and he grins. Meat. You wait for elaboration. None comes. You glance at a pile of stray cats sleeping behind his stall and decide to skip lunch. The smells around the square start to shift. Smoke from the baker's oven mingles with roasting onions and something frying in animal fat. Your stomach's confused, half nauseous, half desperate. You take another bite of your bread brick, washing it down with nothing, because water's a death wish. The crumbs cling to your throat. Then a crier appears. He's ringing a bell, shouting announcements. You can barely understand him, but the crowd listens intently. Taxes, tithes, and a warning about the sickness in a nearby village. You freeze. The sickness. People whisper, crossing themselves. You hear the word plague. A cold shiver crawls up your spine. You look around. Drats everywhere, running under carts, climbing into grain sacks. They're part of the scenery, but now they feel sinister. You imagine one nibbling on your bread last night, and suddenly, breakfast doesn't seem so appealing. Still, life goes on. The bell stops ringing, and the town returns to business. A pair of monks shuffle past, muttering Latin prayers. Their robes are spotless compared to everyone else's. You remember that monasteries bake, brew, and heal, centers of order in this chaos, but also of judgment. You bow slightly, because that seems polite, and they nod curtly before disappearing down the lane. You spot a group of children nearby. They're laughing, tossing pebbles, their faces streaked with dirt. One little boy offers you a piece of fruta, tiny shriveled apple. You smile, touched. You take a bite. It's sour, but the gesture warms you more than the fire did earlier. Humanity still survives here, buried under grime. You wander toward the river, hoping for a breeze. The closer you get, the worse it smells. The water's dark, sluggish, and bubbling in places it shouldn't. People are washing clothes, dumping waste, and drawing drinking water. You quickly back away. You realize that don't drink the water isn't advice. It's a survival rule. Someone beside you drops a bucket, splashing your leg. You mutter a quiet curse, then remember swearing could get you fined or whipped. Speech is risky here. A man sitting on a crate catches your eye. He's sharpening a knife, expression blank. Beside him hangs a string of sausages. Hungry? He asks. You hesitate. What kind of meat? He shrugs. Yesterday's. You decide your bread is plenty. As you walk away, you overhear two merchants arguing about spices. One claims pepper cures everything, from toothaches to evil spirits. The other swears by garlic. You wonder if either of them knows how bacteria works. But it's 1340-something you'd sound insane trying to explain germ theory. Historians still debate how much the average person suspected about disease. But one thing's clear. Ignorance is survival here. Too much curiosity, and people might think you're a witch. You nibble the last of your bread and stare at the horizon. Smoke rises from a distant field, maybe a controlled fire roar, maybe not. The air tastes metallic. You realize how fragile everything feels here. Food, health, life, they're all hanging by a thread woven from superstition and hope. You lean against a post, letting your body relax for the first time since waking. Your stomach's somewhat full, your head light from hunger and the faint buzz of beer fumes. Around you, life pulses rough, raw, resilient. And yet, deep down, you know your modern immune system wouldn't last till sunset. You finish your questionable breakfast and decide to at least look like you belong here. Everyone else moves with purpose: farmers, vendors, mothers herding their kids, and there you stand, an oddly clean outsider in a century that has no concept of casual wear. It's time to blend in. You trudge back toward your hut, pushing open the wooden door that groans like it's complaining about your existence. Inside, the light filters through a tiny slit of a window, illuminating a heap of rough fabrics in the corner. Your clothes. You hesitate. You've seen burlap sacks with more charm. Still, you start layering. First, a linen shirt tiff, you can call it that. It's stiff from being washed in lye and dried over smoke. The fibers scratch your skin immediately. Then come the essentially wool leggings that stop mid-thigh, leaving you to tie them to your belt with cords. It's a puzzle designed by someone who hated comfort. You pull them up, grunting. Every movement feels like wrestling with itchy vines. And then comes the tunicorse wool, heavy, and somehow already smells like sheep. You tug it over your head, trying to ignore the creeping itch spreading across your neck. Congratulations, you're officially dressed to suffer. If you're male, you add a leather belt, maybe a small pouch. If you're female, a linen shift and laced overdress. Either way, everything's held together by string, pins, and stubbornness. There's no elastic, no zippers, just friction and faith. You suddenly understand why medieval portraits always look so uncomfortable. Historians still argue whether medieval fabrics were truly unbearable, or if people simply got used to constant itching. You're beginning to suspect the latter. You find a pair of shoes near the hearth. They're made of thick, untreated leather, cracked and stiff. You try to put them on, but your heel catches. You tug, twist, curse under your breath. Finally, they fit but not well. The left one squeaks, the right one pinches. Walking is going to be a medieval endurance sport. You glance around for something resembling underwear. There isn't any. That's not an oversight. That's normal. Most commoners skip undergarments altogether. You sigh, muttering, medieval times, 0 stars, do not recommend. In the corner, you spot a hata woolen coif that ties under the chin. Everyone wears head coverings. It's a social rule and a health precaution. You slip it on, feeling slightly ridiculous. You catch your reflection again in that warped piece of metal. You look authentic, miserable, but authentic. Outside, the church bell rings again, and a neighbor calls out, "Service soon." You realize that means you're expected there. But before heading out, you decide to at least check your appearance. You rub your face, scratch your scalp, and immediately regret it. Your fingers come away dusty and alive. Lice. They're practically medieval roommates. You shake your head, trying not to panic. Everyone has them. Nobles, peasants, priests. Sits an equal opportunity infestation. The only cure. Shaving your head or rubbing in vinegar and ashes. You consider both, then sigh. It's just one day. You can handle one day. Probably. You step back into the street, adjusting your belt. The fabric clings to your skin in all the wrong ways. A light drizzle begins, soaking through instantly. Medieval clothing is about as waterproof as tissue paper. The wool gets heavier, colder, clammier. Within minutes, you feel like a damp loaf of bread. A woman passes by, balancing a basket on her head. "You look new," she says, amused. You nod, teeth chattering. "Aye," she grins. "You'll get used to the eye chore. It'll get used to you." Then she's gone, disappearing into the fog like some wise medieval oracle of discomfort. You trudge toward the square again, each step squelching. Your shoes fill with mud. Your tunic slaps against your knees. You can feel your toes going numb. The wind picks up, carrying that signature aroma of manure and wood smoke. You remind yourself this is just the start of your 24 hours. You can do this. You pass a tailor's stall where a man works with needle and thread. His fingers move quickly, sewing patches onto a torn cloak. You stop to watch. He glances up. "Need mending?" he asks. You shake your head, then move aside. "I've nobles to dress." You look around. There are no nobles in sight. He winks. They all think they are. It makes you laugh. The first genuine laugh of the day. It feels strange, like fresh air after hours underground. Humor here is dry literally and figuratively, but it keeps people sane. You start to notice details you missed earlier. The colors, for one, despite everything. The town isn't dull. Tunics dyed with madder root glow red. Others shimmer in faded yellows and greens made from plants. It's crude, uneven, but alive, and every stitch represents hours of work. People here don't just wear clothes, they build them. A merchant walks by wearing something finer, a deep blue cloak. You're instantly jealous. Until you remember blue dye came from imported woad or indigo, both expensive. His cloak might be worth more than your hut. He catches your glance. "Like it?" he asks proudly. It was soaked in human urine for 3 days before dying. You blink. He grins. That's how you fix the color. You decide not to compliment him. The drizzle turns to rain. You duck under an awning, water dripping from your hat. Beside you, 2 men argue about taxes again. One's convinced the Lord raised them because his wife saw a kamina bad omen. The other insists it's because the church needs more candles. You listen quietly, half amused, half awed by how little control anyone has over anything. You tug at your tunic again. The wet wool clings like guilt. Your skin itches, your toes squish, your patience evaporates. But you also feel strangely grounded. There's a rawness to it all. No pretense, just survival. You remember those glossy medieval movies with shiny armor and flowing gowns. Lies. Real medieval life is damp, itchy, and smells faintly of goat. A boy runs past, laughing, barefoot, despite the mud. He doesn't care. You envy him. You realize that comfort isn't really a concept. Here it's a luxury of your time. Back then, existence itself was enough. Historians still debate whether medieval people were truly miserable or simply didn't know what they were missing. Maybe both. Maybe ignorance was its own kind of peace. The rain finally eases, and sunlight breaks through the clouds. Steam rises from rooftops, turning the village into a misty dreamscape. For a fleeting second, you almost understand why people romanticize this era. It's ugly, yes, but also simple, direct, alive. Then, a drop of cold rainwater slides down your neck, and you're reminded, romance is for poets. You're just trying to make it till lunch. You finally make it to the heart of the village, the market square. It's the social, economic, and olfactory center of medieval life, a place that smells like everything humanity has ever created and then left out in the sun for a week. You're hit by waves of sweat, manure, dried fish, and something that might be cabbage or might once have been cabbage. Either way, your nose is begging for modern deodorant, or maybe just mercy. You try to move gracefully through the crowd, but that's impossible. The streets are narrow, muddy, and absolutely packed. Chickens flutter underfoot, pigs wander freely like they own the place, and a few kids throw pebbles at a stray dog while an old woman yells at them in dialects you don't understand. You suddenly realize the road you re-walking on is actually just centuries of compacted filth, animal waste, and rotting straw. The cobblestones are somewhere under their historians still argue whether people ever cleaned them. You pass a stall selling fresh meat. It's a dead rabbit, hanging by its feet, with flies buzzing around like they've paid rent. You'd think the butcher might shoo them away, but he doesn't even blink. He's too busy hacking at a slab of questionable beef with a blade that looks like it's been through a war. Next to him, a spice merchant calls out his wares: salt, pepper, and a few exotic powders from the east. You might be tempted until you realize a pinch of pepper costs more than a day's wage. The rich sprinkle it like status symbols. The poor just pretend to cough dramatically for flavor. Someone bumps into you, a man with teeth like broken piano keys. He grins and says something cheerful, possibly asking if you want to buy a turnip. You nod awkwardly, not wanting to offend anyone, especially since half the crowd looks armed with sticks, knives, or just bad attitudes. Pickpockets drift like shadows. You clutch your belt pouch instinctively. Except, of course, you don't have one. You're a newcomer, and you've probably already been robbed. Over by the square's center, you notice a wooden stage. A crowd is gathering. You wonder if it's a play or a performance. It's not. It's a public punishment. A young woman is being accused of watering down ale. The town bailiff shouts something about dishonesty and sin, and before you can process it, she's being pelted with rotten vegetables. The crowd cheers. You take a step back, realizing entertainment here isn't Netflix, it's humiliation. Historians still argue whether medieval punishments were about justice or just social bonding through shared cruelty. You decide to keep walking, trying to ignore the mud splattering your legs. On one side, a tanner works with piles of animal hides, dunking them into vats of urine. Literally, urine. It's part of the process. He waves proudly when you look disgusted. The smell is so strong you taste it in your throat. You want to cry, but the tears might burn. Nearby, a fortune teller whispers prophecies over bones. Her eyes are clouded, her hands trembling. She mutters that you're not from this time. You freeze. Then she grins, showing you a single black tooth, and demands payment. You laugh nervously and back away because you can decide whether she's crazy or the first person here who actually figured you out. Your stomach growls. You search for food that looks even remotely safe. A pie vendor offers meat pies. You ask what kind. He shrugs and says, "Depends what wandered near the oven." You decline. You try bread again, but it's still hard enough to chip a tooth. Some villagers chew garlic raw to hide the smell of rot in their food and their mouths. You try it. You regret it immediately. In the distance, a man coughs violently, doubled over, covered in sores. People sidestep him without a glance. You realize the plague hasn't fully left yet, or maybe it's something else. In this era, no one really knows. Illness is everywhere. It lives in the mud, the air, the people. You feel a tickle in your throat. The market noise rises into a chaotic symphony church. Bells, haggling, crying, laughter, metal clanging. A cart rolls by carrying barrels of ale, each stamped with a crest you can't decipher. The driver whistles as he goes, unaware that his cargo will probably cause more disease than it prevents. Somewhere nearby, a minstrel sings of a noble knight who slew a dragon. You glance around for the dragon's remains, just rats. Always rats. You realize you've been wandering for hours, and your modern feet aren't built for this. You're muddy, itchy, and hungry. You miss your phone, your shoes, your soap. You'd trade everything for a shower, even a cold one. But in the medieval world, bathing regularly is suspicious behavior. People believe it opens your pores to sickness, so you stay filthy, just like everyone else. A sudden shout breaks your thoughts. Two men start fighting over a loaf of bread. A third joins in, swinging a wooden mug. It's chaos. You back away quickly, nearly stepping into a puddle that you really hope is just mud. By the time you escape the crowd, the sun is high, the air thick, and your stomach empty. You've survived the muck barely. You wipe the sweat from your brow, take one last look at the madness behind you, and mutter to yourself, "This place makes Black Friday look civilized." You've barely escaped the market chaos when a deep, resonant clang rolls through the air. The church bell. Its sound cuts through every street and alley like a command from heaven, or maybe from management. In the medieval world, those bells rule time itself. There are no clocks, no phone alarms, no Google Calendar reminders. When that bell tolls, everyone stops what they're doing. Because here, time belongs to God. You follow the stream of people heading toward the church. It's not optional. Even if you wanted to skip, the villagers would notice. In their eyes, missing church is suspicious. Maybe you're a heretic, maybe a witch, or, worst of all, someone who thinks for themselves. The crowd thickens as you approach a towering stone building. It's dark, cold, and a little crooked. Smoke from 100 candles seeps through cracks in the walls, carrying the smell of melted tallow animal fat. You step inside, and the air changes. It's heavy, filled with incense, damp stone, and the faintest trace of mildew. The villagers kneel automatically, crossing themselves in a rhythm that looks rehearsed. You copy them clumsily, trying not to stand out. The priest stands at the front, his voice echoing in Latin. It sounds majestic and incomprehensible, like a medieval version of legal fine print. You don't understand a single word, but you nod occasionally, pretending you do. Everyone else is doing the same thing. You glance around. The stained glass glows dimly, filtering sunlight into colored patches across rough faces. No one looks particularly holy. A couple of farmers are whispering about grain prices. A young man near the back is clearly asleep, drooling onto his sleeve. A woman is glaring at another woman over something that probably happened at the well. Gossip, it seems, is timeless. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly devout or just terrified of eternal damnation. Maybe both. You suspect fear plays the bigger role, fear of disease, fear of sin, fear of being different. The church doesn't just preach, it governs. It decides who can marry, what you can eat, and even what days you're allowed to have fun. Spoiler, not many. The priest raises a golden chalice. Everyone murmurs prayers. You notice his robe looks expensive, far nicer than anyone else's clothes. It's embroidered, shining faintly in the candlelight. You can't help but think, so this is what tax money looks like, in fabric form. You try not to laugh. Suddenly, a sharp sound, someone coughing violently. Heads turn, and the poor soul turns red with embarrassment. The priest pauses mid-sermon, giving the man a glare that could curdle milk. Then he continues, talking about purity, sacrifice, and obedience. You start to wonder how much of that applies to him. A choir of boys starts singing. Their voices are pure, high, echoing through the nave. It's hauntingly beautiful, like something out of a movie soundtrack. But then you notice the boys look tired, malnourished, one of them rubbing his eyes raw. You remember, most choir boys live at the church, serving in exchange for food, education, and, well, whatever mercy the priests decide to show. Your knees begin to ache from kneeling. The wooden benches are rough, splintered, unforgiving. You shift uncomfortably, trying to stretch without making noise. A woman beside you gives you a glare sharp enough to draw blood. You freeze again. You start to zone out, staring at a fresco painted above the altar. It's supposed to show heaven, but all the figures look pale and terrified. Maybe that's just the style. Maybe heaven wasn't meant to look relaxing yet. A sudden thought crosses your mind. If this entire village is here, who's guarding the market? Who's watching the food stalls, the animals, the homes. Then you realize, no one. Theft isn't exactly rare, but the fear of divine punishment is stronger than any lock. It's the medieval version of a home security system. The sermon drags on. The priest talks about sin, about how everyone must confess their wrongdoings, about how life's suffering is a test. You can almost hear the unspoken line, and if you pay the church a bit more, maybe that test will end sooner. Finally, the bell rings again. The congregation stands, mutters one last prayer, and starts filing out. You breathe relief, feeling fresh air on your face again. Outside, the sunlight feels blinding after the gloom inside. You notice how everyone seems calmer. The peasants smile, nodding to each other. Maybe the ritual works in its way. Maybe it's not just fear, it's belonging. In a world where life is short and brutal, even a little order feels like hope. Then someone splashes water on you. You flinch. It's holy water. A kid giggles. You look down and realize you've got mud and ash streaked across your clothes. But the villagers are no cleaner. You blend right in, sort of. As you leave, you hear a man mutter that the priest's new robe came from the bishop's tax. Another laughs darkly. You sense an undercurrent of resentment, quiet but alive. People might be obedient, but they're not blind. They see power where power hides. You walk toward the edge of the square, the sound of the bells fading behind you. For a moment, you think about how strange it is. Everyone in this village lives under the shadow of that church, its rules shaping every breath they take. You try to imagine going a single day without coffee, electricity, or choice and realize you're already there. You pass a shrine on the road, a little stone alcove with a candle burning inside. Someone's left bread there as an offering. Maybe it's superstition, maybe it's faith. You can't tell the difference anymore. And as the wind shifts, carrying the echo of that great bell far across the fields, you wonder not, for the first time, whether you've stumbled into the past, or if this place was always waiting inside the present, just buried under 1,000 years of progress. The afternoon sun is harsh now, glaring down through a thin haze of wood smoke and dust. You squint, shielding your eyes as you step away from the church square. Your stomach still feels uneasy from that bread and ale breakfast, and your throat burns with dryness. You're sweating, itchy, and vaguely nauseous. Basically, you're living the medieval dream. Then you trip on a loose cobblestone and scrape your knee. It's nothing, really just a small cut. But here, a small cut is a death sentence, waiting for an invitation. The wound starts to sting, and before you can even think bandage, someone nearby notices you wince. "Best see the healer," a woman says, pointing toward a hut that smells suspiciously like despair. You follow her gesture, limping toward a wooden shack with bundles of herbs hanging from the roof. Inside, it's dim and smoky, the air thick with the scent of rosemary, garlic, and something pungent that might be mold. A hunched figure looks up from a table cluttered with bottles, bones, and what might once have been frogs. "Sit," the figure says. The voice is gravelly, neither kind nor cruel, just weary. You obey. You explain that you've scraped your knee, expecting maybe a bandage, a little disinfectant, some neosporin. Instead, the healer nods slowly, examines the wound, and mutters, "The blood is angry." You blink. That's not a medical term you recognize. She rummages through her supplies and pulls out a small jar filled with wriggling leeches. You lean back instinctively. She notices your horror and smiles. Without teeth, they balance the humor, she says, as though that explains everything. Ah yes, the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, the medieval version of a medical degree. Historians still argue whether medieval doctors actually believed in them, or just pretended to sound educated, while hoping the patient didn't die too fast. The healer places a leech on your knee. You watch, fascinated and horrified, as it latches on like a tiny, hungry vacuum. She nods approvingly. It will draw out the badness, she assures you. You resist the urge to scream. After a while, she removes the leech, wipes the wound with a rag that looks previously used, and wraps your knee in a strip of cloth that smells faintly of onions. You'll be fine, she says, unless it festers. Fest what? You start, but she's already turned away, grinding herbs with a pestle. You decide not to ask any more questions. You try to leave, but she stops you. Wait, she says, holding up a small vial of greenish liquid. For the pain. You hesitate, but she insists. You take a sip and instantly regret it. It tastes like old socks soaked in vinegar. She grins proudly. Wormwood keeps the spirits out. You're not sure if she means evil spirits or the kind that come in bottles. But either way, you've had enough. You stumble back outside, coughing, and nearly collide with a man leading a donkey. He scowls at you, muttering a curse that sounds ancient and personal. You wave apologetically and keep moving. The woman who sent you there catches sight of your bandaged knee. Ah, blessed remedy, she says. You nod weakly, not wanting to ruin her faith in medieval healthcare. A few minutes later, you pass another doctor. This one's more official looking, with a heavy robe and a pointed hat that makes him resemble a wizard who's lost his wand. He is holding a brass instrument shaped like a spoon and explaining to a small crowd how it can extract evil vapors from the head. He demonstrates by pressing it to a patient's temple. The man screams. Everyone applauds. You decide it's time to leave that scene too. Still limping, you wander toward a nearby cottage where you hear sobbing. A family stands outside, clutching rosaries. Inside, a sick child wheezes. You see the same healer from before, sprinkling herbs and muttering prayers. There's no medicine, only faith and ritual. You realize that in this time, healing isn't about science. It's about hope dressed in superstition. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine did more harm than good, but to the people living here, it's all they had. The healer isn't cruel or ignorant. She's just trying to help in a world without microscopes or antibiotics. You walk on, deep in thought. The leech wound throbs with dull pain. You glance down and notice the bandage is already soaked through. Fantastic. You'd kill for a modern pharmacy or even just a clean bathroom sink. Suddenly, the church bell rings again, echoing over the fields. You glance toward it, half expecting another sermon. But this one sounds different. Slower, lower, a death knell. Somewhere, someone has just died. You watch as a small group of villagers gather near the road, carrying a wooden cart draped in a sheet. The healer walks with them, murmuring prayers. You realize she probably sees more death in a week than you've seen in a lifetime. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of time and decay. The sun is sinking. You take a deep breath, trying to shake the heaviness in your chest. Maybe tomorrow will be better than you remember. There are no antibiotics, no painkillers, no clean bandages, and you just drank a potion made of wormwood and despair. Yet tomorrow's not looking great. As you limp back toward the village square, you catch sight of a man preaching loudly to a small crowd. He's holding a relic bone, supposedly from a saint. People kneel, kissing it, whispering prayers. You can't tell if it's faith or desperation, maybe both. You feel dizzy now. The world spins slightly. Maybe it's the wormwood, maybe it's the air. You sit on a stone wall and close your eyes. Somewhere, a rooster crows, confused about the time. A baby cries. Someone laughs drunkenly. Life goes on, messy and uncertain, stitched together by rituals, rumors, and the stubborn will to survive. And you realize, in a place where pain is constant and comfort rare, people cling to anything, prayer, potions, or leeches that gives them even a flicker of control. You look down at your bandaged knee, half expecting it to glow or sprout moss. It doesn't, yet. You wake the next morning, or maybe it's still the same endless day. Medieval time doesn't exactly come with clear boundaries. Your leg aches, your head feels foggy, and your body reminds you that mattresses made of straw and bugs aren't designed for recovery. But before you can even think about rest, someone bangs on the door. Up, work won't wait. A voice shouts. You step outside, blinking into the pale light. The village is already alive. Smoke curls from chimneys. Roosters crow like they've got something to prove, and the clang of a blacksmith's hammer rings through the crisp air. People are moving everywhere, carrying buckets, chopping wood, feeding animals. There's no coffee, no slow mornings, no scrolling through your phone. You work or you don't eat. Simple as that. A neighbor, broad-shouldered, mud-smeared, and missing most of his teeth hands you a wooden rake. You'll help in the fields, he grunts. You want to protest, but this isn't a place for no. So you follow him, trudging toward the open land beyond the village. The fields stretch wide and uneven, dotted with patches of barley, oats, and hope. You join a line of peasants, stooping low, pulling weeds and turning soil. The earth is heavy and cold. Within minutes, your hands blister. You glance around and realize no one else is complaining. They've been doing this since childhood. Their backs are permanently bent, their faces weathered, their eyes resigned. You try to match their rhythm lift. Dig, pull, but your muscles scream betrayal. The man beside you smirks. Soft hands, he says. You nod, gasping for breath. Scholar, he asks. You almost laugh. Tourist, you mumble. He squints, shrugs, and goes back to work. A bell clangs again, not the church this time, but the forge in the distance. Blacksmiths work there all day, shaping metal into tools, horseshoes, and weapons. You can see the orange glow of their fire even from here. The smell of hot iron drifts across the fields, sharp, metallic, and somehow comforting. At the edge of the farm, women carry baskets of laundry to the river. They scrub the clothes with lye and ash, then beat them against rocks. The water runs brown. Children chase geese nearby, laughing, their feet caked in mud. One slips, falls, and just keeps laughing. You realize they don't know anything different. For them, this is life, and, in a strange way, it's enough. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly miserable or just adapted to their conditions. Maybe both. You can't tell if the calm looks on their faces are acceptance or exhaustion. Around noon, you're given a break. Dinner. Someone says, but they mean lunch. A woman hands you a wooden bowl of pottage, a grayish stew made from barley, onions, and whatever vegetables survived the week. You sip it cautiously. It's bland, but warm. You could almost call it comfort food if you ignore the occasional pebble. Everyone eats in silence. Conversation is a luxury. Energy is spent on survival. Still, there's a strange peace in the simplicity of it. All the rhythmic sounds of chewing, wind, birds, and the distant clang of the forge. Then, a sudden shout breaks the calm. A man has collapsed in the field. People rush to him, murmuring prayers. His face is pale, his breath shallow. The healer from yesterday appears out of nowhere, kneels, and presses her ear to his chest. She shakes her head. "Too much, son," she says softly, "or the humors are out of balance." She looks at you for a moment as if she knows you think differently. No one cries loudly. Death is a daily visitor here, not an event. You swallow hard, your appetite gone. The rest of the day blurs into one long ache. You haul water, gather firewood, and try to stay upright. A local miller shouts at his apprentice for spilling grain, and you notice the boy can't be older than 10. His arms are wiry, his eyes tired. Childhood doesn't exist. Here it's just unpaid labor. As the sun dips low, the sky turns a bruised gold. The village returns from the fields, a weary procession of dirt and shadow. The smell of smoke and sweat fills the air. A few musicians start playing pipes and drums, slow and mournful. People dance, not joyfully, but as if to remind themselves they're still alive. You sit near a fire, watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. Someone hands you a cup of ale. It's warm and flat, but it numbs the pain. You take a sip, trying not to think about the river water that went into making it. You overhear two men talking about taxes. "The Lord's men come tomorrow," one says bitterly. "Half the harvest they'll take." The other nods. "And if we don't give it?" he asks. The first man looks at him like he's insane. "Then we hang." You realize that every grain these people harvest doesn't really belong to them. They're tenants, workers, human fuel for someone else's comfort. Freedom, in this time, is a rumor told by drunks. You glance down at your hands blistered raw, shaking. The skin under your nails is black with dirt. You think about modern jobs, air-conditioned offices, ergonomic chairs. Even your worst day back home seems like paradise now. The stars begin to emerge, faint at first, then clearer as the last light fades. The villagers finish their meal and start heading home. Someone begins to sing softly a lullaby. Maybe. It carries on the breeze, low and haunting. You stay there for a while, staring at the fire, listening to the hum of crickets and distant church bells. The night feels alive, ancient, endless. Tomorrow will come too soon, and when it does, there'll be more work, more blisters, more pain. But here, no one complains, because in the medieval world, survival is the job. By the 1990s, methamphetamine had transformed from a military stimulant into a street-level empire. The drug was no longer just a chemical. it was a movement. And its new kings weren't scientists or pharmacists. They were bikers, cooks, and criminals. The Hells Angels, America's most infamous biker gang, had already been experimenting with meth since the 1970s. But now they had competition. Ruthless, profit-driven cooks who saw meth not as a drug, but as a business model. It was cheap to make, fast to sell, and frighteningly addictive. Law enforcement called it poor man's cocaine. Addicts called it the devil's gasoline. Unlike cocaine, which came from distant jungle, meth could be made anywhere, in a garage, a trailer, even a motel bathroom. A few boxes of cold medicine, some drain cleaner, and red phosphorus were all it took, and that's what made it unstoppable. By the early 2000s, rural America, the quiet towns and empty plains, had become the unlikely center of the meth universe. Local news headlines screamed, "Meth lab found in church basement, family of 4 arrested for cooking meth in nursery." Children were being born addicted. Communities were rotting from the inside out. The war on drugs had found a new enemy. But here's the twist. While the U.S. was busy fighting small-town cooks, a new empire was forming across the border. Mexican cartels saw an opportunity, and they took it. Their version of meth was cleaner, purer, and stronger ice. They didn't need Sudafed or stolen chemicals anymore. They built industrial labs that could produce tons of meth at a time. By the late 2000s, this new wave of cartel meth had swept across America, replacing the homemade version almost entirely. What had started as a wartime stimulant in the 1940s had now become a multi-billion-dollar global enterprise. But the story wasn't over yet. Because as the world began to fear crystal meth, a new kind of monster was waiting. One cooked up not by gangsters or soldiers, but by scientists in white coats. By now, UVA probably noticed that meth isn't just a party drug. It's a brain hijacker. The first time someone inhales, smokes, or injects it, their brain's reward system goes into overdrive. Dopamine floods the synapses like a busted fire hydrant, and the user feels euphoric, unstoppable, alive. But this rush is deceptive. Underneath that initial high, meth starts to reorganize the brain. Neurons shrink, synaptic connections weaken, and the circuits that control judgment, impulse control, and self-preservation begin to fray. Historians and neuroscientists still argue whether the brain can ever fully recover after chronic meth use. But even short-term exposure changes behavior dramatically. Here's where it gets terrifying. Meth doesn't just make you feel good. It rewires your priorities. Survival instincts are hijacked by obsession. You no longer crave food, sleep, or social connection in a normal way. You crave the drug itself. Hunger fades. Fatigue fades. Everything else fades. Chemists describe it as structural plasticity gone rogue. The neurons that release dopamine grow extra branches, reinforcing pathways that link pleasure directly to the drug. Meanwhile, the neurons responsible for judgment atrophy. You can almost imagine your brain as a city suddenly overrun by a single gang. Streets that once led to home and work now only lead to meth. And it's not just chemistry, it's psychology. Chronic users often develop paranoia, hallucinations, and compulsive behaviors. The tweaking that addicts describe is the visible manifestation of these internal neural rewards. You might see someone pacing, talking to shadows, or obsessively cleaning their house. And it's not just a quirk, it's their brain screaming in chemical loops. Meth is also merciless physically. Teeth rot, skin sores appear, hair thins, and extreme weight loss becomes the norm. The body itself becomes a warning billboard for the drug's destructive power. You could be perfectly healthy one day and, within months, look like you've aged decades. The question of why meth is so addictive is still debated. Some researchers point to its potency in releasing dopamine faster than cocaine. Others argue it's the way meth lingers in the body, providing a long-term memory of high. Either way, it's designed to keep users coming back again and again, despite consequences. Yet the story isn't only about addicts. The drug's reach infiltrates families, communities, and entire economies. Meth doesn't just steal health, it steals time, money, trust, and futures. Small towns that once thrived now collapse under waves of addiction. Schools, hospitals, law enforcement, everyone feels the ripple effect. By the time users realize they're in trouble, meth has already rewritten their biology and their lives. And the kicker, there's no single cure. Detox is brutal, recovery is slow, and relapse is frighteningly common. The very chemical that once gave them euphoria now haunts their every thought. So while the world may see meth as a criminal issue, the deeper story is human, a combination of chemistry, environment, and desperation that transforms ordinary people into shadows of themselves. And, in many ways, it's a mirror for society's failures, the gaps in healthcare, education, and economic opportunity that let this drug flourish. This isn't just history, it's a living, ongoing crisis. And if you think you could just try it once, without consequence, well, the science says otherwise. After surviving the relentless demands of the fields, the scorching sun, and the ever-present grime, you decide to explore deeper into the village's nightlife. Though nightlife here is more survival than entertainment. Lanterns flicker along muddy streets, casting long shadows across timbered houses and alleys. You can hear the faint strumming of a lute and the occasional shout of someone who's had one too many cups of ale. You wander toward the tavern, a low, smoke-filled building that smells like old beer and burnt bread. The door creaks as you push it open. Inside, the room is dim, lit only by hearth fire and a few candles that sputter as they struggle against the smoke. The floor is sticky. Patrons have tracked in weeks of mud, manure, and spilled ale. You try not to gag. Behind the bar, a rotund man polishes a mug with a rag that has clearly seen better centuries. He glances at you, sizing up your clean-ish clothes and city-like posture. You feel like an obvious outsider. A few villagers sit at rough wooden tables, hunched over mugs of ale, playing dice or talking quietly. A bard in the corner strums a melancholy tune, singing of lost nights and distant lands. You listen, fascinated. Even here, music is survival. It soothes and distracts from the misery outside. You take a seat cautiously, aware that personal space is a luxury you don't have. The bartender slides a mug toward you. Ale, he grunts. You sniff it. Warm, yeasty, slightly sour. You take a tentative sip. It's not bad, but definitely not your local craft brew. You'll get used to it, maybe. Historians still argue whether taverns were primarily places of recreation or centers for gossip, crime, and recruitment for raiding parties. Judging by the looks you get from the locals, it's probably a mix of all three. As you take another sip, you notice a game of dice at the next table. A young man throws double sixes and grins triumphantly. His opponent, a farmer with a scar running down his cheek, groans, slapping the table. No one calls for fairness. It's all part of the game. Luck, skill, or bluffing, whatever it is, it dictates status here, at least for the night. You glance around and see an elderly woman leaning against the wall, knitting what looks like a patchwork of blankets. She mutters quietly, telling stories to no one in particular. Her tales blend saints and sinners, mythical beasts, and very real plagues. You realize that oral storytelling is not just entertainment here, it's how knowledge survives, and maybe also how the villagers escape reality for a little while. From the corner, a drunken man suddenly stands, wobbling as he gestures at an imaginary foe. He swings a mug wildly, missing everything. People duck. Laughter bursts out. You can't help but smile. Chaos has its own rhythm in this world, and laughter, even nervous laughter, is a currency in short supply. Your stomach grumbles. The ale helps a little, but it doesn't replace the lack of proper food. A plate of bread and cheese lands on your table. Hard, stale bread, cheese that might be weeks old. You eat anyway. Hunger, you realize, is more acute than taste. Outside, a group of children chase each other through the mud, barefoot, their feet black with dirt. One trips, scraping his knee. You wince, remembering your own leech treatment yesterday. He cries for a moment, but the other children drag him up and continue running. Toughness is learned early here. Softness gets punished. A sudden shout erupts. Outside, the night watchman spotted something. Everyone freezes for a moment, then mutters to each other. Bandits, wolves, just drunken pranksters. You'll never know. Nights are dangerous. Every shadow could be a threat. You shiver, realizing you wouldn't last long without learning every secret of the dark lanes and alleys. You finish your bread and cheese, thanking the bartender with a nod. He grunts in return. Nothing else is needed. Communication is minimal here. Survival is about economy of movement, speech, and sometimes compassion. Stepping back outside, you breathe the cool night air, tinged with smoke and wet earth. The stars are bright above, sharper than you've ever seen. The moon glimmers off puddles, reflecting the chaotic village below. You notice the distant outline of the watchtower. Its lone lantern spins slowly, a sentinel over the night. You realize, with a mix of awe and dread, that surviving a medieval night requires more than stamina. It requires constant vigilance, adaptability, and a healthy respect for chaos. And as you make your way back to your straw-filled lodging, the wind carries the faint strains of the bard's lute and the laughter of the tavern, reminding you that life here is rough, unpredictable, but strangely alive in a way modern comfort has dulled. Dawn breaks slowly over the village, pale and hesitant, as if even the sun is wary of what this day will demand. You wake on your straw-filled mattress, stiff and sore, and immediately regret thinking that yesterday's hardships were over. Your knee throbs faintly from the leech treatment, and your hands still feel raw from the endless work in the fields. You push yourself up, swaying slightly as the cold floor meets your bare feet. It's going to be another long day, and you suspect your modern muscles are completely unprepared for the medieval grind. Outside, the village is stirring. Smoke curls from chimneys like lazy ghosts, and the distant crow of a rooster blends with the lowing of cattle. You trudge toward the well, aware that fetching water is no gentle chore here. The bucket is heavy, the rope frays in your grip, and your arms complain with every lift. You pause to wipe the sweat from your brow and glance around. Women are already at work, washing clothes by the river, scrubbing linen against stones until their hands are red and raw. Children run barefoot across the mud, squealing as they chase chickens, oblivious to the dangers of disease or starvation that lurk at every corner. Your stomach growls. Breakfast is sparse, stale bread, watered-down ale, and maybe some cheese, if you're lucky. You nibble cautiously, wondering why anyone would willingly live this way. And yet, the villagers move with a rhythm, a harmony born of necessity. No one sits idly. Time is a resource, too precious to waste. Historians still argue whether peasants genuinely found satisfaction in this routine, or whether they simply endured it out of sheer survival instinct. You suspect it's a mix of both. By mid-morning, you are assigned to the fields again. Today, the task is harvesting wheat. The stalks are tall and heavy, and your modern back protests with each awkward bend. Sweat streams down your face, soaking your shirt. Blisters form on your hands, and the roughness of the stalks scratches your arms. Beside you, a peasant woman hums a melody you can't quite identify, slicing through wheat with practiced ease. Her scythe moves in smooth, fluid arcs, a stark contrast to your clumsy hacking. You realize it will take years, or a miracle, to reach that level of efficiency. Around noon, a wagon rattles past, carrying sacks of grain to the Lord's manor. You watch as the peasants salute, muttering polite greetings, even though their hearts might be simmering with resentment. Taxes here are absolute. The Lord claims a hefty portion of every harvest, and any refusal is met with harsh punishment, sometimes death, sometimes imprisonment, sometimes a cruel combination of both. You swallow hard. Modern complaints about taxes suddenly feel absurdly trivial. The midday meal is no respite. You sit on a worn bench beside other workers, scooping pottage into your mouth. It's thin, bland, and occasionally gritty with sand or straw. A man near you mutters that last week the pottage had horsehair in it. He chews thoughtfully, shrugs, and continues eating. You're grateful there's no horsehair today, but the thought lingers. In medieval times, even food is a gamble. After eating, you return to the fields, where the sun is relentless. The sweat dripping down your back seems endless, and the heat is suffocating. You see a child carrying a basket of vegetables, barely able to reach the edge of the field. Her small hands are raw, her feet caked in mud. You realize she is not playing. This is her contribution to survival. Childhood is a fleeting luxury here, one that disappears almost at birth. Historians still argue whether medieval laborers were oppressed by external forces or simply conditioned to accept harsh routines as normal. As you wipe sweat from your eyes and hack at stubborn weeds, you begin to understand. The truth is likely both. These people endure hardship because they must, but they have also internalized it as part of the natural order. Mid-afternoon brings a sudden commotion. A stray dog has gotten into the fields, scattering wheat and panicking chickens. A peasant man shouts, waving his arms, and the dog yelps, running away into the nearby woods. This brief distraction is oddly uplifting. Chaos, even small, is entertaining, a reminder that life isn't always strictly regimented. Devon, in a medieval village. You chuckle quietly, realizing laughter is rare and thus precious here. By late afternoon, your muscles scream, your back aches, and your hands are raw from repetitive work. You stop to rest, leaning against a wooden fence. The wind stirs faintly, carrying the scent of smoke, dust, and livestock. A few villagers pass, nodding at you in acknowledgement. Some smile faintly, some scowl. The scowls are more honest. You remember the leech healer's words from earlier. Survival is both a test and a lesson. As the sun begins its slow descent, signaling the end of another day, you trudge back toward the village. Your stomach aches again, partly from hunger, partly from exhaustion. In the town square, a small crowd has gathered around a traveling merchant who is showing off brightly dyed cloths. You stop for a moment, intrigued. The colors are vivid, almost shocking, compared to the muted tones of everyday village life. People murmur and examine the fabrics carefully. For a brief moment, you see a glimpse of beauty in an otherwise brutal world. Night approaches, and you are tasked with tending the livestock. You help guide sheep into pens and check on cows, ensuring none are missing or injured. The work is tiring, but there is a rhythm to it, a soothing repetition that almost makes the exhaustion bearable. Somewhere, a dog barks, echoing across the village, and a child squeals in delight. Life continues, stubbornly persistent. Finally, your shift ends, and you retreat to your straw bedding. You are filthy, sore, and hungry, but strangely alive. You reflect on the day, the relentless labor, the unyielding social hierarchy, the ever-present threat of disease or injury. Medieval life is not merely hearted, is a constant negotiation with pain, hunger, and the unpredictability of existence. And yet, somehow, people endure, adapt, and even find moments of joy. You close your eyes, listening to the distant sounds of the tavern, the lowing of cattle, and the soft rustle of wind through thatched roofs. Tomorrow promises the same, perhaps worse, but for now, you let the rhythm of the village lull you into a weary sleep. You wake before dawn, not because you want to, but because the rooster insists. Its crow slices through the quiet, and the faint chill of morning air reminds you that sleep is not a right here, it's alone, and the day will soon collect. You roll off your straw mattress, brushing away a few insects that decided to share your bed. Your back aches like it's made of wood. Your hands sting from yesterday's blisters. And you realize this isn't a bad morning by medieval standards. It's just another one. You step outside. The village is a gray silhouette under the pink smear of sunrise. A few thin trails of smoke curl lazily upward, promising breakfast somewhere, though breakfast usually means bread, maybe onions, maybe yesterday's leftovers, if you're lucky. You join the others, heading toward the communal ovens, clutching a rough hunk of dough you traded for a few hours of extra labor last night. The air smells of yeast and ash, and the heat from the ovens offers a rare comfort. Inside, women slide loaves in and out of massive clay mouths. They gossip, trading stories of sick children and absent husbands. You catch fragments. Someone claims a wolf was spotted near the forest. Someone else swears the miller's son can see ghosts. Historians still argue whether medieval villages were truly isolated or deeply interconnected by gossip networks like this. But standing here, it feels like the latter. News travels faster than any horse. You nod politely to one of the women, who eyes your strange mannerisms again. "You from the next village?" she asks. You smile awkwardly. "Something like that." She squints, then shrugs. "Doesn't matter. Everyone's from somewhere. Everyone ends up here." You take your bread and head toward the fields again. But as you walk, you notice something unusual. The birds aren't singing. The wind feels heavy. Then you see it. A small group of villagers gathered near the well, their faces drawn tight. You edge closer, curiosity outweighing caution. Lying beside the well is a man, motionless, his face pale and lips blue. The crowd murmurs. "The fever," someone whispers. Another shakes their head. "No, the bad air." A third mutters. "The devil's punishment." No one says plague, not yet. The word itself carries power here, a curse that invites fear and isolation. The local healer arrives, an old man with hands as rough as bark and eyes that have seen too many deaths. He kneels beside the body, pokes gently, then sighs. He's gone. He crosses himself, muttering something about confession and sin. The villagers disperse slowly, leaving two men to carry the body away. No one asks about burial rites or purification. They already know what comes next. You feel your stomach twist. Death here isn't unusual, but its casualness unsettles you. In your world, death is sterile, hidden in hospital, softened by euphemisms. Here, it's immediate, visible, and accepted. You wonder how people survive emotionally when death is such a constant companion. Work continues as if nothing happened. The wheat still needs cutting. The cows still need milking. You join the others, but your thoughts linger on that lifeless face by the well. The rhythm of the sickle feels different. No itch, stroke against the stalks like a heartbeat fading. By midday, your shirt clings to your skin with sweat. The air is thick, the sun unrelenting. A fellow worker, Tomas, offers you a drink from his water skin. You accept gratefully, ignoring the faint taste of leather and something vaguely metallic. "You'll toughen up," he says. "Everyone does, or they don't last." You nod, not sure which group you belong to. During a short rest, Tomas tells you about his brother who went to fight in the King S Wars years ago and never returned. "They said he died a hero," Tomas mutters. "But what's that worth when your family's hungry?" He spits into the dirt. The bitterness in his tone is sharp enough to cut. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants saw loyalty to their lords and kings as duty or delusion. Listening to Tomas, you realize it was probably both, a mix of pride, fear, and resignation. People believed because they had to. Belief was armor in a world that offered little else. As the sun begins to fall, a cold wind stirs, carrying whispers of winter. The villagers glance toward the forest, where the trees sway like dark sentinels. Somewhere deep within, wolves howl. It sends a shiver down your spine. Wolves aren't metaphors. Here they're reality. and they come hungry when food is scarce. You finish your work and follow Tomas to the tavern. The air inside is thick with smoke and laughter. The bard is back, strumming a tune about a knight who slayed a dragon but lost his heart to a peasant girl. The song is oddly tender, full of longing. You sip warm ale and feel a strange comfort in the rhythm of voices, clinking mugs, and the faint hum of humanity enduring together. Later, outside, the moon is full. It glows over the fields, turning everything silver. You stand for a while, breathing in the cool air, letting the quiet seep into you. For a fleeting moment, it's beautiful. The stars burn sharp, the wind hums soft, and the world feels ancient but alive. Then you hear a sound, a low moan, far off, near the well. You turn sharply. Nothing, just shadows and silence. But your heart races. You remember the man who died that morning. You remember the woman's story about ghosts near the miller's son. You tell yourself, it's the wind. It's always the wind. Back in your small hut, you settle onto the straw bed, staring at the ceiling. You think about the villagers, their quiet endurance, their strange mixture of faith and fear. You think about how you've survived this long, barely, and you realize something humbling. You're no hero here. You're just another body trying to make it to dawn. Morning again, but this one feels heavier, quieter, slower, as if the air itself knows something's wrong. The familiar rhythm of the village is off. You step outside and see it immediately. Smoke rising from near the church. Not thick black smoke from a fire, but thin gray ribbons curling toward the sky. Funeral smoke. You walk closer, and the scene unfolds. A small group of villagers gathered around a crude wooden cart. Upon it, wrapped in rough linen, lies another body. 2 deaths in 2 days. The priest murmurs prayers, voice trembling in the chill morning air. You can see fear in the eyes of those around you, subtle but growing. Someone mutters that the sickness is spreading. Someone else blames bad air, while another whispers about witchcraft. Old Marta's been brewing something strange again, says a man near you, crossing himself. Maybe she brought the curse. You notice how quickly suspicion blooms here. Fear needs no proof, just needs a name. The church bell tolls once, twice, then stops. No one dares linger. The villagers scatter back to their homes, whispering prayers, clutching charms. You stand there for a moment, the scent of smoke clinging to your clothes, realizing that paranoia spreads faster than any disease. You head toward the healer's hut, the same man who applied your leech treatment days ago. He's busy grinding herbs with a stone pestle, muttering under his breath. They're saying plague, you tell him, quiet. He glances up, his face shadowed. They always say plague. Sometimes they're right. He sighs, crushing another handful of dried leaves. It's fear that kills faster than the sickness. You ask him if there's anything people can do to stay safe. He shrugs. Pray, boil water. Don't breathe too close to the dead. Then he pauses, eyes narrowing, and stay away from crowds. But good luck with that. His voice carries the weariness of someone who'd seen this before, someone who knows how futile resistance often is. The day stretches thin. The fields are quieter now. Fewer workers have shown up. The air feels dense, almost heavy. You notice people avoiding each other, keeping distance in a time long before anyone knew the word quarantine. Even the animals seem uneasy. Dogs bark at shadows. Chickens refuse to feed. The rhythm of the village, the comforting, relentless cycle, has fractured. As the sun climbs higher, the heat turns oppressive. You return to the fields, but the silence there feels unnatural. A woman coughs, a deep, ragged sound. Heads turn instantly. She waves a hand, muttering that it's just dust, but you can see the worry in her eyes. Historians still argue whether the Black Death of the 14th century truly reshaped European society or merely exposed what was already crumbling. But standing here, watching fear spread like wildfire, it's clear that plague doesn't just kill bodies, it dismantles trust. By late afternoon, the tavern is nearly empty. The bard is gone. The air inside smells stale, untouched. You sit alone for a while, sipping warm ale, trying to make sense of it all. Outside, the sun bleeds red over the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields. The world feels like it's holding its breath. You step outside just as the village bell tolls against low, deliberate, each sound echoing across the hills. Another death. You don't know who. You don't ask. As night falls, a mist rolls in from the forest, soft but eerie. It curls around the cottages, blurring their edges. You can barely see a few feet ahead as you walk. Every sound feels magnified, the distant hoot of an owl, the crunch of your boots, the flutter of wings in the dark. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, a man shouts, "Stay away," followed by the sound of a door slamming. You hurry your pace, heart pounding. Fear, once subtle, is now everywhere, etched into the rhythm of breathing itself. You duck into your hut, bolting the wooden door. The straw mattress feels rough and cold. You pull your blanket close, trying to ignore the faint sound of coughing in the distance. Sleep doesn't come easily. Your mind wanders to thoughts of home, clean water, medicine, light switches. Here, even surviving one more night feels like a gamble. Then, sometime near midnight, a knock echoes against your door. Soft, hesitant, you freeze. Another knock, slightly louder. "Please," a woman's voice whispers. "Help me." You hesitate, every instinct screaming to stay still. The healer's warning repeats in your head. Don T. Breathe too close to the dead. You stay silent. After a long pause, the footsteps retreat. The night returns to its uneasy quiet. You stare at the ceiling, guilt gnawing at you, wondering if you just let someone die. Outside, the mist thickens. The village sleeps uneasily, waiting for the dawn if it comes at all. Historians still argue whether fear or faith carried people through such nights. Maybe it was neither. Maybe it was the stubborn human instinct to keep living, even when the world feels like it's ending. You close your eyes, praying silently to a God you don't really believe in, and hope the morning will still be there when you wake. Morning again, but this one feels heavier, quieter, slower, as if the air itself knows something's wrong. The familiar rhythm of the village is off. You step outside and see it immediately. Smoke rising from near the church. Not thick black smoke from a fire, but thin gray ribbons curling toward the sky. Funeral smoke. You walk closer, and the scene unfolds. A small group of villagers gathered around a crude wooden cart. Upon it, wrapped in rough linen, lies another body. 2 deaths in 2 days. The priest murmurs prayer, voice trembling in the chill morning air. You can see fear in the eyes of those around you, subtle but growing. Someone mutters that the sickness is spreading. Someone else blames bad air, while another whispers about witchcraft. Old Marta's been brewing something strange again, says a man near you, crossing himself. Maybe she brought the curse. You notice how quickly suspicion blooms here. Fear needs no proof, just needs a name. The church bell tolls once, twice, then stops. No one dares linger. The villagers scatter back to their homes, whispering prayers, clutching charm. You stand there for a moment, the scent of smoke clinging to your clothes, realizing that paranoia spreads faster than any disease. You head toward the healer's hut, the same man who applied your leech treatment days ago. He's busy grinding herbs with a stone pestle, muttering under his breath. They're saying plague, you tell him quietly. He glances up, his face shadowed. They always say plague. Sometimes they're right. He sighs, crushing another handful of dried leaves. It's fear that kills faster than the sickness. You ask him if there's anything people can do to stay safe. He shrugs. Pray, boil water. Don't breathe too close to the dead. Then he pauses, eyes narrowing, and stay away from crowds. But good luck with that. His voice carries the weariness of someone who'd seen this before, someone who knows how futile resistance often is. The day stretches thin. The fields are quieter now. Fewer workers have shown up. The air feels dense, almost heavy. You notice people avoiding each other, keeping distance in a time long before anyone knew the word quarantine. Even the animals seem uneasy. Dogs bark at shadow. Chickens refuse to feed. The rhythm of the village, the comforting, relentless cycle, has fractured. As the sun climbs higher, the heat turns oppressive. You return to the fields, but the silence there feels unnatural. A woman coughs, a deep, ragged sound. Heads turn instantly. She waves a hand, muttering that it's just dust, but you can see the worry in her eyes. Historians still argue whether the Black Death of the 14th century truly reshaped European society or merely exposed what was already crumbling. But standing here, watching fear spread like wildfire, it's clear that plague doesn't just kill bodies, it dismantles trust. By late afternoon, the tavern is nearly empty. The bard is gone. The air inside smells stale, untouched. You sit alone for a while, sipping warm ale, trying to make sense of it all. Outside, the sun bleeds red over the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields. The world feels like it's holding its breath. You step outside just as the village bell tolls again, slow, deliberate, each sound echoing across the hills. Another death. You don't know who. You don't ask. As night falls, a mist rolls in from the forest, soft but eerie. It curls around the cottages, blurring their edges. You can barely see a few feet ahead as you walk. Every sound feels magnified, the distant hoot of an owl, the crunch of your boots, the flutter of wings in the dark. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, a man shouts, "Stay away," followed by the sound of a door slamming. You hurry your pace, heart pounding. Fear, once subtle, is now everywhere, etched into the rhythm of breathing itself. You duck into your hut, bolting the wooden door. The straw mattress feels rough and cold. You pull your blanket close, trying to ignore the faint sound of coughing in the distance. Sleep doesn't come easily. Your mind wanders to thoughts of home clean water, medicine, light switches. Here, even surviving one more night feels like a gamble. Then, sometime near midnight, a knock echoes against your door. Soft, hesitant, you freeze. Another knock, slightly louder. Please, a woman's voice whispers. Help me. You hesitate, every instinct screaming to stay still. The healer's warning repeats in your head. Don't breathe too close to the dead. You stay silent. After a long pause, the footsteps retreat. The night returns to its uneasy quiet. You stare at the ceiling, guilt gnawing at you, wondering if you just let someone die. Outside, the mist thickens. The village sleeps uneasily, waiting for the dawn if it comes at all. Historians still argue whether fear or faith carried people through such nights. Maybe it was neither. Maybe it was the stubborn human instinct to keep living even when the world feels like it's ending. You close your eyes, praying silently to a God you don't really believe in, and hope the morning will still be there when you wake. You're staggering now, half delirious, half enlightened through the final hours of your medieval day. The torches burn low, and the damp wind slithers through cracks in the stone wall. You realize you've survived nearly a full rotation of this brutal clock, but only barely. Every part of your body feels invaded by grime, by hunger, by history itself. You started this morning wide-eyed, maybe even cocky. Now, your shoulders ache from lifting buckets. Your throat rasps from smoke, and your pride is somewhere under a pile of manure outside the latrine. You've seen what the textbooks never tell, not the glory of nights, but the groan of ordinary survival. And yet, as you shuffle back to that straw bed, your home for one last night in the Middle Ages, something inside you softens. The flicker of the candle catches the clay walls just right, and for a heartbeat, it feels peaceful. A reminder that people here laughed, cried, sang, and fell in love too. They just had to do it without Wi-Fi or antibiotics. You settle into your straw, and tiny insects resume their midnight dance in your hair. You're too tired to care. Outside, dogs bark somewhere far away, and a monk's chant drifts like a lullaby through the dark. Time itself feels slower, heavier. Every minute stretches out, demanding patience. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants really were miserable all the time, or if their slower communal life actually gave them a kind of quiet contentment we've lost today. You can't answer that, Tor, just trying to keep breathing. Your mind wanders to the faces you met: the blacksmith with soot-streaked arms, the farmer with cracked hands, the child chasing a wooden hoop through mud. Their world was cruel, but also oddly human. The rules were clear. You work, you pray, you endure. Everything else was luxury. A fringe account in medieval journals even claims some peasants described visions of angels after days of fasting and toil. What modern science might call malnutrition-induced hallucinations. Still, it makes you wonder, maybe the boundaries between suffering and transcendence were thinner here. You cough again, and the sound echoes through the still air. You can taste the smoke of the fire that never quite goes out. Your heartbeat slows. For the first time today, there's no one shouting orders, no market noise, no church bell. Just the medieval night, the real, ancient silence that our modern lives have drowned. And then the rooster crows. It's not dawn yet, but your body tenses anyway. muscle memory from one endless day in history. The candle beside you sputters its last glow and dies. You stare into the dark, feeling both trapped and strangely grateful. You've made it. 24 hours in a time that would have crushed you by noon. The truth is, you wouldn't last much longer. Infection, hunger, or a noble's bad mood would probably finish the job. But still you lasted the day. You tasted the grit of history. You felt what it meant to be human before comfort existed. And in this quiet ending, you realize something profound. The past wasn't built to destroy you. It was built to remind you what survival costs and what progress is worth. Now the world fades, like parchment curling near firelight. The night exhales, and you finally rest. So, take a deep breath. Let that smoky, medieval air drift away, and replace it with something cleaner, calmer, something from your own century. You've walked through mud and hunger, through fear and superstition, and somehow come back whole. You've seen that behind every dusty relic and ruined castle, there were real people just trying to make it through the day just like you. The flicker of your imaginary candle dims now. The sounds of the medieval village fade first, the clatter of hooves, then the distant chant, then the last lonely crow of a rooster. What remains is only the quiet hum of your room. Let your muscles loosen. The straw mattress becomes your pillow. The buzzing flies become the fan. You're home again, safe, clean, loved. Think about what you've learned here, not from a textbook, but from time travel of the mind. That comfort isn't weakness, that survival used to mean pain, and that gratitude, perhaps, is the one luxury every age can afford. If you're still awake, picture the stars above that medieval sky, endless, soft as silver. Somewhere, a peasant once looked up at the same sky and wondered if life could ever be easier. You, centuries later, are their answer. Now, let that thought settle into your chest. Let the air move slow and steady. And as your eyes drift closed, remember history isn't just in museums. It's alive, breathing softly every time you close your eyes and wander backward. Sweet dreams, traveler. You've earned your rest.